Good morning, Commissioner Eskridge. Commissioners Eskridge and Bookland, I'm not showing your audio component. Good morning, Commissioner Bookland.
Good morning.
There we go. Oh, I think you have two Zoom meetings up, so I'm going to try to kick you off of one so you don't have an echo.
Actually, I got off of it, so
Okay.
I think we're okay. I was having trouble logging on this morning.
Okay, it looks like we got you. You're good. Thank you. And Commissioner Eskridge, can you hear us?
This is Carolyn Clower. Are you talking to me?
No, I was talking to our Commissioner Eskridge.
Yep, I'm here, Janelle. Good morning.
Thank you.
Okay, now that we have the audio issues settled, I'll call the meeting to order at 8:01 a.m. And welcome to all of our guests. Janelle, would you like to go through a virtual meeting guidance, please?
Of course. Good morning, commissioners, members of the public and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all. Number one, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Number two, please state your name before speaking. Number three, in general, please have your cameras on if possible if you're speaking. You may turn your cameras off if you're experiencing technological challenges. And finally, as a reminder, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host if need be. And this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. With that, let's have a wonderful meeting today and welcome everyone.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. Michael, do you have any announcements for this today?
President Hubble, I do not have any announcements.
Okay, that will take us to appearances by the public. Do we have any appearances by the public? Now we have the public hearing, so we'll take any appearances on the budgets at that point, but do we have anybody else that is here that wishes to say anything other than the budget? Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so that'll move us to the consent calendar where we have the approval of minutes from the 15th of September, the cash statement operating fund, the approval of abatement of 2023 property tax levy, review of bids and award of contract for the 2022 fleet vehicle purchases, approval of increased transaction amount for phase 2 of the PFAS sample collection, and then approval of transaction amount and award of contract for professional services on the treatment plant's electrical service equipment replacement. Do you have any questions on any of those items before we get a motion? Any questions? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
It's Wilson. I'll move approval of the consent calendar items as presented.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by?
I'm happy to second Commissioner Meyer.
Okay, second by Commissioner Meyer. All those in favor of the consent calendar say aye.
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 And any opposed?
Hi, Tom. Commissioner Clark, I'll abstain.
Okay, Commissioner Clark's abstaining. I think you missed the last meeting, is that?
Correct.
Yep. Okay. So that will take us to item 4, which is topics. 4A is the public hearing and discussion on the 2023 proposed operating, capital projects and debt service budgets. So what we'll do is Michael, were you gonna have a presentation before we start the public hearing?
Michael, you're muted.
Is Dana there? Does she know if there's a presentation before we do the public hearing? Any introductory remarks before I open the public hearing?
President Hubble, there is a presentation. I think Michael's just trying.
Okay, yeah, I have a screen open, so I was not able to unmute myself. I apologize for that.
Okay, so you don't have a presentation or anything to say? before
I do.
Oh, okay, go
So,
ahead then, Michael.
So sorry. All right, that's a little better. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I'd like to give the commission and public just a brief overview of the proposed operating budget before we have a public hearing. I presented the budget to the commission at your last meeting, the full budget. I've also had an opportunity to present the budget to the Dane County Cities and Villages Association last week. There's in your packet, you will see an affidavit that on September 13th, we sent a copy of the proposed budget electronically to our owner communities. And there is a proof of notice that we advertised for this public hearing in the Wisconsin State Journal. The budget, my proposed budget to the commission for your consideration is $52 million budget. And you can see through the graph that the majority of the revenues to support this budget come from sewer service charges that are paid for by our owner communities. And that's about around $50 million. The remainder of the revenue comes from septic haulers, struvite fertilizer sales, interest income, things of that nature. And the bottom pie chart really illustrates where our dollars go. And wastewater treatment, the actual treatment process itself, is one of the largest chunks of revenue of expenditures we have. And the collection system, which is the lighter green wastewater collection, shows the difference in that the money we recover for wastewater collection is quite a bit less than wastewater treatment. However, you will see that the transfer to debt service, the large blue, indicates how much money we are investing in physical infrastructure, and the darker green is the contribution to the capital fund in terms of cash and other resources to also support capital. And this really illustrates that we are a capital intensive organization, and it's important to not only our function, but making sure things operate effectively for the long term. Our service charge increase proposed for in this budget is 8.9%. And this is consistent with the promise I made to the commission and owner communities last year of our attempt to smooth out these rate increases. You can see here, if you look at our historical service charge increases over time, what they have been over the last couple of years. And of course, your eye is drawn to 2020 in terms of a fairly large service charge increase. And that story begins in 2018 when we had a flooding event, and our owner communities experienced a lot of charges through I&I into the system. And we recovered additional revenues. So in 2019, we used some of that revenue to buy down the rate. because we were ramping up our capital program. And that's why there was a 6.3 service charge increase in 2019. But then when you go into 2020, we had to make up for that difference in the rate buy down to recover those costs. This up and down motion of these service charges is what we're trying to correct through the 6-year horizon of trying to keep our service charges at 9% or below. The budget is 52.3 million, and some of the major drivers are in energy, contracted services, staffing needs, and health insurance. We really wanted to make sure that we're investing in employees, that we're making sure we have adequate energy and gas, and that we're handling those increases. The impact on households is $250 per year, and that is what the cost of district services are. And of that $250, $96 of it is just the pure collection and treatment of wastewater. And I like to compare that to those who are not in our service area. If you are on a septic system, the cost for the septic system can be around $200 just to have it pumped. And so it shows that when you're on a sewer system and the environmental benefits of it and meeting regulatory requirements, the value that our owner communities and households are getting for the work. Commission has conducted strategic planning this year, and this helped us focus our resources for what's being proposed in this budget for your consideration for the next year. And some of the highlights that I want to reinforce here is that we're continuing to invest in critical infrastructure. Our plant is old. It needs refurbishment, and our treatment plant was built with federal funding. And now all of this infrastructure is reaching the end of its useful life, and we're needing to build budget capacity to handle fixing our infrastructure. And that's why we're looking at a 6-year horizon of 9% increases. We are also focusing on proactive regulatory compliance with Badger Mill Creek, phosphorus compliance, and with phosphorus, with mercury, and continuing to invest in pollution prevention programs to achieve compliance. Financial sustainability and stability is also an important part. And one of the things that the commission has indicated is a desire to move to more cash financing. And we have been working towards that for several years now, because we know there are certain things we just need to do every year, and we should have adequate cash on hand to do that work. Cash financing, if you look at the life cycle, if we were to debt finance something, the cost on the life cycle is 20% more. In 2022, we cash financed about 7% of our infrastructure. This proposed budget we're cash financing about 20% of our infrastructure replacement. And we're projecting that by 2028, that will go to about 60%, or I should say 40% cash financing. So we're achieving that to create that stability and to handle unforeseen circumstances. This budget also mitigates climate impacts. We're supporting the Commission's efforts next year to develop a climate mitigation plan. The district is in the top 20 consumers of electrical and gas power in the Madison gas and electric service area. And we take those impacts very seriously, and we'll be developing that climate impact and mitigation plan next year. Effective operations is also part of this budget. In order to operate our equipment effectively and maintain it, we've moved towards reliability centered maintenance, and that requires planning ahead of doing work instead of waiting for things to break. And over the long term, that will save us in costs. And that's why there are two planners in the budget to help us do that planning. Workforce development is always something we need to invest in, and we must, because our most important asset is our people. And we're in what I would consider a frenetic labor market right now with wages, and the private sector is adjusting and pivoting very quickly to this, not as quickly as we are. And so we have increases in our market adjustment for all staff at the district. We're also investing in training programs, internal training, so we can promote from within and develop our future leaders. And of course, deal with equity issues, as we want to be a diverse workforce, and that helps us in our bottom line. And then finally, we want to smooth service charge increases. You saw the chart earlier that showed our service charges bumping up and bumping down. Thanks to the work of our capital planning and finance management, we're looking at a smooth service charge increase to absorb the $230 million of infrastructure that is necessary for us to invest in over the 6 years and beyond. And in this budget, and I haven't talked about it much, there were a lot of things that did not make the cut this year in order to keep that service charge increase at below 9%. And some of these cuts that I've made increase the district's risk a little bit, but we feel as an executive team, those risks we believe are manageable. One, for example, is our blowers are aging, and that's why we're moving to liquid processing phase 2 to look at low dissolved oxygen treatment, which is much more cost effective and would eliminate the need for the blowers. These blowers could fail at any time, and we would have to replace them now, and that would be a $500,000 to $1 million to replace those blowers, and would require a budget amendment, because I would not have authority to make those types of purchases. So those types of things are not built into this budget, and it amounts to about $2 million worth of deferrals and cuts that were made just getting to the 8.9%. And those things will be revisited in the 2024 budget. The timeline is we have a public hearing today and some initial deliberation by the commission. We'll have our meeting on October 13th, which is an in-person meeting. And that is where we'll receive final commission discussion, and you'll provide final direction to me so I can prepare the budget for your adoption of the budget on October 27th, which will be a virtual meeting. And then customers and our owners will be notified of the new rates in the 1st of November. We are, in addition to receiving verbal testimony today, we are accepting written comments from members of the public up until 4:30 p.m. on October 10th. And those can be submitted directly to Amanda Wegner and we will receive those written comments and share those directly with the commission. I know yesterday we've already received one written comment from one of our owner communities, and we'll have those available and ready for you to look at, commissioners. So with that, I'll turn it back over to President Hovell to open the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. Just one thing, Ezra, I saw your hand up. Can that wait till we get to deliberation and discussion?
It's just a really quick clarifier, Tom, if I could. Michael, when we estimate the impact on a household, it's an average Madison home, a median at Madison home, if I'm remembering correctly, and then that number represents our charges plus the community charges, right? It's sort of the total sewer bill that household faces. Do I have that right?
That I presented it that way at the meeting, at the last meeting, Commissioner Meyer, and that is not included in the number I presented today. That 250 is purely the district's charge.
Okay.
If we were to add like an average Madison collection system charge, that would be another $200 per household. So it'd be about 450.
Good. I think it's such a useful number for folks and for those who haven't been at all the meetings but are just here today from the public, that I thought that was a good one to clarify. So thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Tom.
yeah, thank you, Ezra, Michael. Okay, I'll call the public hearing to order. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak? If you could raise your hand, then I'll recognize you. Okay, President Clow from the Village of McFarland. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, members of the commission. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Carolyn Colley. I'm president of the Village of McFarland Board. We are customers of MMSD, and I'm also the vice president of Dane County Cities and Villages Association. We did have the opportunity to speak with Michael last week, and he answered lots of questions for us. And we really appreciate that. We really appreciate the very high level of service that you provide. I can tell you as village president, I'm extremely happy that we do not have to try to run a wastewater treatment plant in the village, because it's a huge undertaking. And if I think it's expensive now, if the full brunt of this were borne by the village, it would be very difficult. So we appreciate our partnership, and we know that we're receiving a very high level of service. One of the things that I wanted to speak to was just the impact of 9% increases. When you look at levy limits and you look at the constraints that we are under as units of local government, not a special district as you all are, 9% is not something that we can see as the type of increase that we get, regardless of what infrastructure investments we need. And it's a lot. It's disproportionate to what we're able to do in our own communities, and the impact is considerable. I do sincerely appreciate the efforts of the board to keep the increases to 9% and to make difficult choices. It sounds like there were some difficult choices made this year with blowers and some things to keep that and honor that commitment, because wild swings are as difficult or maybe more difficult for us to deal with than 9% increases. But just for you to know that that's a lot, and it has a big impact on our communities, and it's disproportionate to what we're able to do. And we appreciate things like trying to do more cash financing rather than debt financing. But also you should know that as units of local government, that's not an option for us. We are primarily debt financing. We don't have the ability to levy additional funds in order to cash finance our purchases. So just like to say we appreciate the high level of service, but please be cognizant and continue to be cognizant and cautious about the cost increases, because it's a lot for our communities, and it's a lot year over year for folks to bear. It really does disproportionately impact those who are at the lowest end of the income spectrum and least able to pay. And I know one of the things, Michael, we didn't have an opportunity to talk about last time, maybe you can address it later, is Madison's program to help their low-income families with their utility bills, and how that might be possible to extend that to other communities. Because I think when you look at 9%, there are certain people that really hurts. So thank you all for your time.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Do we have anybody else that wishes to speak? Do we have anybody else? Okay, Forbes McIntosh, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. My name is Forbes McIntosh. I represent the Dane County Cities and Villages Association, which serves as the staff administrator for the Executive Council, the statutorily defined entity that is comprised of chief elected officials, the mayors and village presidents of the cities and villages served by MMSD outside of Madison. I'm testifying today to pass along comments made at the Executive Council meeting held last Thursday, in which MMSD Chief Engineer and Director Michael Muka presented on the budget. Executive Council Chair and Middleton Mayor Gerda Berard complimented and extended his appreciation to Mr. Muka for his presentation last week. But I do want to raise some of the concerns that were raised at the meeting, which I will attempt to try and convey an explanation of those concerns. The first one was the concern with the 9% annual increase that are projected from 2023 to 2027. At this time last year in 2021, MMSD staff explained to the commission during budget proceedings for the need for an average 6.6% rate increase for 2022 and a projected annual 9% ratepayer increases from 2023 to 2027 budget cycles. One of the talking points was that the commission is in the midst of, quote, tackling a $1 billion challenge. A 6.6% rate increase followed by a forecasted 5 years of 9% compounded rate increases will work out to be over a 50% increase to the ratepayers over a 6-year period. This is significant in and of itself, but when looked at the cumulative impact to ratepayers and taxpayers, when we add in tax and rate increases for other utilities, municipal, county, and school district, this adds up pretty quickly on an annual basis to the average ratepayer and taxpayer. MMSD municipal customer owner communities, while they control some aspects of how the residents will be impacted by rate and tax increases for government services, they don't have control of all of them. But the local taxpayer and ratepayer, when they see the cumulative impact, believes the locally elected officials do, and they hold them accountable. I believe the ask of the commission is to be sensitive to this, because MMSD is but one local or regional governmental entity that implements rate or tax increases on the residents that live in the MMSD boundaries. The sensitivity request is being made because while other owner communities have agreed that MMSD Commission needs the financial flexibility to operate successfully, the communities served, and I expect the individual ratepayers, don't want the projected 9% annual increases to become the acceptable or self-fulfilling budget spending target. The concern is that if there is an expectation of 9% annual rate increases through 2027, therefore anything under 9% rate increase may be seen internally as a victory and possibly an opportunity to add new spending items that might not normally be entertained because there's an assumption there is room to spend. Again, while the 9% annual increases are significant in and of itself, when combined with increases that may occur for other municipal capital and operating budgets and other utility increases, it may become difficult for the individual ratepayer or taxpayer to bear. The second concern is the 5% MMSD employee market adjustment was raised at the meeting. Concerns have been raised with this budget item. The question is whether providing such an increase, permanent increase at this time is premature. As explained by MMSD staff at the September 15th budget presentation to the Executive Council, the MMSD presentation here, the district proposes to, quote, address the financial uncertainty and the cost of living increases that staff have experienced during the pandemic and currently, so that this budget includes a 5% market adjustment for all staff, as well as continuing mid-year performance increases for staff. According to staff at the Executive Council meeting last week, this one item represents about 1% of the proposed 8.9% increase. So I believe that was 1%. Further, it was explained at the meeting that MMSD provided staff a 3% rate increase last year. And in answer to that question, other than possible retirements, MMSD has experienced little to no turnover of full-time staff over the past year. As municipalities, I believe they recognize and agree this is indeed a challenging economic period and competitive labor market for all employers, including local governments. But with the Fed's efforts to battle inflation and other forecasted economic factors, the question being posed by some of our leaders is a permanent wage increase to address the financial uncertainty and cost of living increases that staff have experienced appropriate at this time. And while MMSD is proposing to pass along the full 1% increase to ratepayers to provide the newly proposed annual wage adjustment, many other communities would like to do the same, but cannot or are not. The economic conditions 1 year from now may be very different in both product and service and labor costs. If that should occur, it is unlikely a permanent wage decrease wouldn't be implemented to recognize the different market adjustment. Again, are permanent wage increases the correct action when economic and market factors are currently in flux? And while MMSD is proposing to fund increases or market adjustments, for other local governments and utilities are not. While MMSD staff has identified Milwaukee and Green Bay sewage districts providing market wage adjustments, is that the norm this year in the broader utility and government employer arena? And is the concern justified that the Madison Commission may lose many employees to other sewage districts or other employers if the 5% additional increase is not provided? Again, the question raised by some municipal members: what has been MMSD's turnover to date to justify an additional 5% wage increase to pass along to our local residents and ratepayers? The final item that that was identified is cash financing for capital projects. I think the cities and villages understand the benefits of cash financing. I suspect every municipality and utility district would like to implement such a policy goal. There are major benefits in the long term with savings to the ratepayers indeed. Short term, however, it does put those ratepayers into a 6-year period of 6.6 to 9% projected rate increases. I think the ask to the commission is to consider, with other tax rates and fee factors impacting ratepayers cumulatively, none of us should be budgeting in our own silos. We all need to look at rate, tax, and fee increases in a combined or cumulative perspective. Inflationary increases are impacting all of us, and that includes the individual ratepayer and taxpayer. While some of the budget increases are likely recognizing increased costs due to inflation in markets, some of it is also directly attributable to an upfront cash financing principle or goal. We need to look at the ratepayers and taxpayers during these difficult economic and inflationary times and adjust that policy or gas pedal or lever as needed. While the commission is looking at the long-term savings, I believe some of the municipal owner communities are asking the commission to also weigh the short-term consequences to the ratepayers during an economic challenging times. Timing can be everything. In short, cash financing should not be viewed as an absolute as a policy, but rather a lever or gas pedal that can be gauged in a manner that takes into account other possible factors, such as the economy as it affects municipalities and ratepayers and taxpayers, and levy limits municipalities are required to live within. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this time on behalf of the municipalities. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Forbes, on behalf of the DCCVA for their summarizing their comments. Tom, you have a question for Forbes?
Yeah, yes, I do. Forbes, I just have kind of a simple question, I think. Do you know how many of the communities pass on MMSD's costs as just part of their tax bill that would count towards levy limits? The reason I ask is because, a lot of the communities that I'm familiar with do not. It's part of a separate utility that passes on the sewer district cost, so that wouldn't count against the community's levy limits. But it sounds like there must be communities out there, and I guess I'm aware of that as well, that pass it on just as part of the tax bill. So I was just wondering if you can tell me, do you know like how many might do that?
I don't know.
To give us an idea.
Yeah, I don't know, but I think the point that was trying to be made at the last meeting was, yes, in many cases you're exempted from the levy limit, but that doesn't mean, spending whatever increases you provide, regardless of this of the levy limit in a cumulative fashion or combined fashion, they add up quickly because of the local tax increase that may occur for the property taxes of that local municipality, your water and utility rate increases, maybe your garbage, maybe your EMS and fire, if they do it separately. Yes, utilities are often outside of the levy limit in that regard, but they all, when they come together, come out of the same wallet as in a combined fashion. So I think that was kind of the concern is.
Okay, so the point is the cost is cumulative, but it might not affect the levy limit of probably most communities, the way they bill these sewer costs.
That's the way I read into it, but I also
Okay.
know that I'm not sure if that, yeah. Some members may have identified it as being part of their levy limit, but I read into it as kind of more broadly.
Okay, thank you, Forbes.
Okay, Sarah, you have a question for Forbes?
Yeah, one follow-up, Forbes. I'm happy to just have you get back to us on this. Thank you for conveying the conversation that happened at DCCVA last week. Wondering if the owner communities would be willing to share their approach to employee engagement, whether they're doing one-time payments to employees, or kind of help us understand the context where our 5% proposal fits in comparison to what they are doing or are able to do this year as far as employee compensation goes. That would be really helpful information for us to have.
Yeah, I could probably call all 28 of them because I know there was one large community that's just doing a bonus and not a permanent wage increase.
Yeah.
That was announced in the
Okay.
newspaper, probably for the same reasoning. But I'd be happy to put that together and get it to the commission.
That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Forbes. Any other questions for Forbes? Anybody have any questions for Carolyn Clow of McFarland? Okay, I don't see any hands. Okay, so is there anybody else that's attending that wishes to make any comments during the public hearing on our budget or budgets? Anybody else? And I'll make the last call. Anybody else for wishing to speak on our budgets? Okay, seeing none, that will take us to discussion of the 2023 proposed operating capital projects and debt service budgets. Michael gave some information at the beginning of the project, or of the, not the project, of our budget for our budget hearing. And so, and I think Sarah asked a very good question about getting relevant information from our customer communities as to what they're doing, and we'll hopefully have that information within 2 weeks. Anybody else have any other discussion they wish to bring up or have? Now's the time to do it. And then, of course, at the following meeting in first meeting in November when we're meeting in person. Ezra, go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. Michael, just so Forbes surfaced that about 1% of the 8.9% proposed increase accounts for the staff market changes, or maybe the market plus performance. I'm not sure. Just checking with you. Is that an accurate portrayal of those numbers, or give us a little bit of enlightenment around that if need be?
A 1%. There's a 5% market adjustment, and that 1% is the equivalent of $90,000. And if you look at, if we were to reduce our service charge by 1%, that would require about $500,000 of reductions. And so, unless we were to do no increase, a zero increase, that would get us, it would get us close. But us reducing it wouldn't get there.
I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't follow that, Michael. Could you try explaining it in a different way?
The 5% market adjustment increases our costs, obviously, and 1% of that 5% is equivalent of $90,000. So if we were to, instead of giving staff a 5% market adjustment, we gave them a 4%, we could reduce our spending by $90,000. So if we wanted to go to, let's say, a zero increase, it'd be $90,000 times 5. And that would be the reduction in spending that would occur. And then the final, I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but if the challenge here is to reduce the service charge increase to achieve 1% reduction in the service charge increase, say going from 8.9 to 7.9, we would have to find about $500,000 in reductions in spending.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's the point I was just trying to get my head wrapped around it, and it's sounding, consistent with past years for me, where the staff side of things is just really a relatively small proportion of the total overall budget, and if we do try to think about any places where we can shave costs just a little bit, that one just isn't your most sort of effective place to do it. And of course, there's all the other considerations that come in with that, which I understand very, very clearly both sides. I mean, the owner communities not being always in the same boat as far as being able to do the same treatment of their staff, I understand, loud and clear, but also our, really strong interest in a sustainable long-term workforce that can compete in the STEM world we're in and all of that. But so I think that's a really important one for us to think about, but also being clear on how sensitive that dial really is or is not to the ultimate service charge increase at the end of the day. Thanks, Michael.
This is Sarah. Can I jump in on that same topic?
Okay, do you have something else to add on that, Sarah, on that same topic?
Yeah.
Before we move to Ken and
Yeah,
Brad?
just a clarification on that same topic. It sounds to me like the point is, if it's $90,000 per percent of market adjustment, that would be essentially $500,000, which would be 1% of the total rate increase. So Forbes' point is correct. It's about $450,000 in total to do a market adjustment of 5%. So I just want to make sure that that was clear to everybody, that those numbers do add up, and that the Cities and Villages Association is saying basically that bump of $450,000 to do a market adjustment this year is a significant part of the rate increase and one they are questioning or have concerns about.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Ken and then Brad.
Yeah, some feedback based on what we've heard today. I received similar feedback from the DC VA, and I think the concern, a big concern here is obviously it's 9% this year, but it's 9% for future years, next 5 or 6 years, which I can appreciate that concern. As a commissioner, I feel the infrastructure investment is needed for years to come. One card we have on the deck on that is cash financing versus debt. And I think if we adjusted that, it's a big part of those increases in the future. And I know we've had a number of discussions on cash financing versus debt in the past, but I would tell you this has been pretty good and productive feedback from our member communities. On the market rate adjustment for wages, I am a fan of that. How that is done. One reason I'm a fan of that is because the compensation adjustment, in my opinion, is needed due to the inflationary environment that we're in. But how that is done, I think we've heard some feedback today from the commission and the member communities. That's productive. If we ran 5% versus or 4% versus 5%, operate a year with a couple less employees, or do a one-time bonus. Those are a few of the options that came to mind for me. But again, I think it's the 9% from year to year to year to year. That's a driver of some of the feedback today. Thank you.
Okay, Brad, thank you, Ken. Brad, go ahead. Brad, you're muted.
I am muted. Okay. I wanted to thank Forbes for his comments. I thought they were very thoughtful, and the association obviously gave a lot of consideration to the proposed budget, which I appreciate. We don't get a lot of comments on the budget from year to year, and it would be nice to have more input for us to consider. One of the things that Forbes said was that part of the rationale for the 5% increase was staff retention. And I think he asked a question about, well, what has been the turnover from year to year? And in reviewing the budget, I think I did see a graph, I can't find it right now, that indicates the number of employees who have resigned each year over the last few years versus those that have retired. But if we could I don't know if Michael has some additional information he can provide on that now, that might be helpful, or at the next meeting. But I guess, yeah, I'm also supportive of a market rate increase given the inflationary environment that we are currently in. Knowing a little bit more about how other communities are dealing with it, I think would also be helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Murphy, I can provide that information on the staff retention at the next meeting in a little bit more detail. In
Okay.
the commission agenda report. I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Any other commissioners have any comments? Okay, I know Grant's not here, so hopefully somebody can brief him or make sure Amanda sent him a message to watch the tape of the meeting so he gets an idea of what it is, because he'll probably be at the next meeting. So there's really
this
two.
is Sarah, sorry, can I jump in
Go
with
ahead,
one more
Sarah.
thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, apologize. Just one more kind of question for future information about the market rate increase. I'd also be curious, Michael, where we're at in our regular cycle of doing a market analysis of our wages. I know we did a big wage study quite a few years ago now, and it's been on our to-do list to look at that in the future. Just wondering if you could give us some context on that, the schedule for looking at that again, what you and HR have been thinking about that, so we can kind of appreciate this in the context of our broader approach to pay moving forward.
Yeah, this is something that is on our agenda to discuss with the Employee Leadership Council, and we expect to do a market survey next year, because we're getting at 5-6 years since we've done the last one, and it's time to test the market and look at that. So after I expect to come back to the commission next year with a proposal on doing a market analysis for both wages and salaries.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Ezra and then Tom.
Thanks, Tom. I just wondered, I'm guessing, judging on what we're hearing, in real time in response to what we heard from communities today, and Michael heard at the meeting last week, we might want to interrogate these couple of areas of the wage increase for staff and the cash financing move. I generally have the sense that maybe we're all in a pretty similar place. These things reflect policies and approaches we've taken before, but we want to think really hard about the impact that has on the communities and on the people who ultimately pay, in the households. If we're going to do that, we're talking about some good information we can sort of tee up for next time around the wage increase, which I think will be really helpful for us to put that in perspective. the other piece being the cash financing. I wonder if we can just have Bill sort of queued up and ready next time to talk about the cash financing move, and kind of using Forbes, analogy of the gas pedal, the pace at which we're moving in that direction, and whether there's any flexibility there, and sort of what impact changes in that would have over the, not just this year's rate, or service charge increase, but over the several years out, and thinking about the smoothing we're talking about, and of course, keeping an eye on the impact on communities and households. If we could do a little bit of, have some of that ready, it would really help our deliberation. I think next meeting is our final commission sort of deliberation on the budget, right? Or is there one more out there where
Yes, that's it.
Yeah. So to me, it just like to make sure, Michael, that you and staff are ready to dig in on both of those areas, and that would help all of us out a lot.
We will.
Thank you.
Okay, Tom, you're up.
I was just gonna say exactly what Ezra just said on the back end of that, it seems that, just as a matter of fact from my previous life, what a lot of governments do is that we end up borrowing more for road improvements and other types of similar projects because we have to. And the other thing that it does is it spreads out the costs over time, obviously, but it also, you're able to affect your levy limit that way. And I know we don't have that, but the cumulative effect on taxpayers and ratepayers may be something that we have to consider in this circumstance, especially when DCCVA is, asking us to at least look at that portion of our tax rate. So maybe we just need to have a look at that at the next meeting. If Bill can put something together, just like Ezra was talking about, I'd sure like to see that. So I was glad somebody else brought that up, and not thinking I was the only one. I can feel Jim Martin spinning a little bit right now, but the fact of the matter is, with how we fit into a lot of our customer communities, it's something we may just need to look at again. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So I was going to bring that up. The way I've kind of see it is that we have a few issues. One is the market increase and how we fit with our customer communities. And even though it may not have a large effect on our rates, it's at least something to show that we're attending to their need or their desires and needs, because quite frankly, for many of the positions, they're in the same boat we are. If they lose engineers, or it's oftentimes the same pool of engineers that they go for. Then we have the issue of the several years of 9% or thereabout increases. A good part of that due to our move to do more cash financing, which is the third issue, transfer to the capital fund. And our transfers go from 3.5 million in 2022, then to a total of almost 11 million, if I have it right, in 2028. So that's a good increase. And that's, they're kind of go from 1 million to 1.5 million or so every year of additional money to the cash, to the capital projects fund. So this year would be about 20% would be capital cash, the capital project be cash financed, compared to the 7% that we had last year, or for 2022. One thing I want to mention too is that what the district has done over the past few years is move to smaller but more projects. And you can see that with our liquid stream processing, that we're breaking it up over the course of a few years and not doing what used to be done, where they'd have just one really big, massive project that they would borrow $50 or $40 million for. And then, and of course, 40 or 50 million isn't as much today as it was 10, 15 years ago. So keep that in mind. So I think, Bill, I don't know, you're probably going to want more direction than just say something about the cash financing. So I guess I was thinking that when we did our treatment plant connection, or I'm sorry, the interceptor connection charges, we took that out over a longer period of time to please the customer communities. If you remember that, we kind of softened the curve, so to speak. So I don't know if that's something you can do with this, is because the problem is every year affects the next year of what we're doing in terms of our cash financing, the way I look at it anyway. So what if we don't do as much this year, what do we do the following year? Do we keep reducing it? Or do we, in our capital project plan goes out that 6 or 7 years, do we take it out, try to on the idea, take it out longer, or do we just abandon the idea? So, I mean, we could look at an idea where we try to flatten the curve, or we look at an idea where we just abandon our idea of cash financing altogether that we've been working on the past several years. So I'm just throwing those options out. Ken, you have your hand up. What are you thinking?
Tom, I was just gonna ask Bill or Michael what the current interest rates are, and have they fluctuated a fair amount as the Fed has adjusted, or do the clean water rates stay pretty standard or similar at a certain level?
We can share more information about that. Our clean water fund loans are actually very stable for them. It's a little over 2% right now is what a 20-year loan is for, and with they are connected somewhat to inflation. So we expect that will go up in the next year or two. You know, it would be speculative to say how far, likely not above 3%, but it's still on an overall value, a really good value if we are to debt finance.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, thank you. So one thing I did want to mention is, I think Michael kind of touched on this during his introduction, is that the amount of money that we have in the capital projects fund is also useful to the district in funding projects, because we have to pay for projects and pay for expenses more regularly than we get reimbursement from, say, the state or for the Clean Water Fund loan money. And the other thing is, not all of our projects qualify for Clean Water Fund loans. And so I don't know how that works. You know, I haven't dealt in enough detail in the next several years of the budget, but some of our projects that don't qualify for Clean Water Fund loans, historically, we have always cash financed. That way we don't have to go out into the open market. And we just then do the Clean Water Fund loans for those projects that are able to receive that type of funding. So that's another thing that has to go into the qualifier of, you know, what projects we have, like our IT project wouldn't qualify for Clean Water Fund loans. New expansions for territory and that typically don't. So that's all. It gets a little more complicated than just saying cut it out, because I'm sure they're taking into account those projects that they think would and would not qualify for Clean Water Fund loans when we do the cash financing. So, Bill, do you think you have some direction there? The idea of flattening the curve, so to speak, that whole COVID thing, and then maybe looking at it if we were to just completely abandon the idea too.
I think we have enough direction. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sorry to have to throw that on you, but okay. Is there anybody else that has anything to add before we close our item here on the budget? Anybody else have anything to say? Okay. If not, thank you all. And thank you to Carolyn and Forbes for your providing information and your comments to us on our budget. We appreciate that. As I think it was Brad said, it's not often that we get comments on our budget. Okay, so I'll
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, everybody. We'll call the topics item closed, and we'll move on to the Chief Engineer and Director's report. Michael, item A, the CED report.
I do. I have a few things to report to you. I'm going to share my screen again. And let's see. All right. Okay, I have several things to share, so I thought I'd put a presentation together. First, I want to congratulate Commissioner Clark. He has been reappointed to another 3-year term in the commission. The Executive Council last week, which includes the chief elected officials of the owner communities in the cities and villages, have reappointed him. So congratulations. Badger Mill Creek compliance. We're progressing with our work, connecting with stakeholders on the 4 potential options for Badger Mill Creek for phosphorus compliance. And commissioners may recall in a presentation from Marty Griffin that those 4 options include 1, discontinuing the discharge at Badger Mill Creek, building a treatment plant to reduce phosphorus, adaptive management, and also trading, watershed trading. And in a meeting yesterday afternoon, Paul Kent and I met with some of the senior DNR officials, and it looks like that the trading option is going to be almost off the table for us, bringing our options down to 3. And the work that Marty Griffin has been doing, adaptive management, appears that we may be limited in our ability to do adaptive management, which is narrowing our focus to likely 2 feasible options around discontinuing the discharge or building a satellite treatment plant or another treatment plant. One of the things I was really encouraged by in our meeting with the DNR yesterday is we're working in collaboration, and they seem to be open to the idea of seeing how do we identify barriers and remove them, and how do we use science and data help us make decisions on these options. And so I was very encouraged by our discussion yesterday, and we'll be circling back with the commission very soon when we have the feedback from stakeholders and we're able to process some of the information we've received from the DNR. So more to come on that. I did outline to you that we had 3 violations, and I reported them to you at the last meeting, but I didn't have many details yet. So I wanted to share a few images. I always share with you other these small overflow events, and I thought, why don't I just show you what they look like? This is that casting you see in the front is dissolved air flotation, and there's a large tank underneath that casting where air is introduced into the waste stream, and the solids attach to that air, and it floats to the top, and then that's skimmed off and goes through additional processing. Sometimes, like what happened here, is that the foaming will squeeze out. So this is what 25 gallons or so of a discharge looks like, and this was cleaned up immediately when it occurred on August 9th, and we did provide notice to the DNR within 24 hours, and we reported to them with a report. And these are the types of things that I think I shared with you a few years ago that the DNR wanted to hear about every overflow. So even small internal overflows such as this, we're reporting. And so that's why I'm reporting them to you. Second one is an acid digester. And I'm going to see if you can see my cursor, but this acid digester right here was drained so we could clean it. And there's some really interesting photographs we have inside there. This acid digester was constructed as part of the 11th edition, and we had to remove grit. And the contractor, as they were removing grit, one of their hoses leaked, and And some of the acid, some of the material, some of the solids went into the storm sewer and ended up in a catch bait or a detention basin down here. These detention basins, one here and one there, were installed as part of the 11th edition as a way to capture waste so that it would not leave the plant. And that was about 20 gallons of wastewater or of acid sludge that went into these locations. It was about 1 minute of a hose breaking and it was cleaned up immediately. We did have an air permit deviation from August 27th. This gets a little bit more technical, but the gas flare, which requires that a hydrogen sulfide concentration measurement be taken and recorded, is something we have to do. And we deviated from the requirements when the sulfide rose above the detectable limits of 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million. It's sometimes hard to know why the limits change, but we did notify the DNR and reported within 24 hours of this deviation of our air permit violation. On a good news side, we started to test electric lawnmowers. These are lawnmowers we maintain turf on the plant for a lot of functional reasons, that we have access to our tanks and our clarifiers, because we bring equipment and hoses in, and also to manage wildlife as well. And this is in our effort to try to find ways to reduce our impact on climate change. And the types of the engines, the gas-powered engines, do emit a lot of CO2 emissions. And this first demonstration showed that while this equipment is not as efficient and as quick as a gas-powered unit, there are savings in maintenance of this equipment because they're really not maintaining small engines. So we're still evaluating the cost return on investment and looking at the climate impacts of these things. The Artisan Residence Program, we're excited we're getting near the end of our first year of our experiment with having an artisan resident. And we were able to engage with new communities. And this is a really important work to build community conversations around water. And we are moving into the next RFP stage to hire an artisan residence for this next year. And the artist, educator, and residents, their role is to engage people around water. It is an opportunity for the district to get out into the community in new and unique ways and expose people to what we do and have them take actions to help us with water quality. So really excited for the next year of the Artisan Residence Program. And then my final report is that Kathy Wunderlich, who you know is our Director of Engineering, she is leaving the district and she is headed into the private sector, focusing on all things water and on a national scale. And our project engineer, Lisa Coleman, is serving as an interim director until we fill the vacancy. And I'm currently looking internally for the next director hire. And that process started this week. So with that, I'll turn it back over to President Hubble and the commission to see if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Does anybody have any questions for Michael? Michael, that first part of your report with that you're meeting with the DNR, we're going to hear more information. I can't remember what meeting that was going to be.
Yeah. We will. We have something on our calendar coming up. It's still in a little bit of time. We're still in the stakeholder engagement. We're still meeting with communities, but we'll be rolling up with some focused options for the commission to consider.
Okay. Ken, you have a question?
Yeah, Michael, I like the battery operated mowers. That's good good use of the technology.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the regulatory and legal review. Paul? There
Good
you are.
morning, everyone. This is the meeting where we kind of review legal services for the past month, primarily August. And one of the projects that we've been working on over time is to develop some real estate acquisition templates to help with easement acquisition and other kinds of things. That project has been ongoing. We also had a few issues to work through with the Madison water utility and the issue on Regent Street. On the HR front, there were a couple of issues that have come up in the context of the handbook update and a couple of personnel questions that came up. And on the regulatory side, we're looking both at PFAS in terms of issues in pretreatment and some options there, but also taking a close look at what the implications are for the federal rule. I think I mentioned at our last meeting, the feds have a proposed rule to list certain PFAS compounds as CERCLA or Superfund substances, and we're looking at what implications that may have, particularly for biosolids. And then, as Michael mentioned, as a lead up to our meeting with DNR and some other work, we continue to look at Badger Mill Creek options so that we have can keep that dialogue going. So that was kind of where we were. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you. Alan, you're going to do the operations report?
Yes, Commissioner Hubble, I'll be bringing that up just here shortly. There we go. Good morning, commissioners, guests of the meeting. My name is Alan Grooms. I'm operations manager here at the district, and I'll be presenting the September operations report, which will be looking month back in review on the August performance metrics. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. Looking back at plant performance for the month of August, we had very good results overall, pretty much in line with historical norms. CBD 5 on the discharge side was 2.5 milligrams per liter, so it's less than half of what we're allocated on a basis for discharge limit. Ammonia treatment was very good, which is indicative of getting enough air into the system and getting full treatment on the CBD on the biochemical oxygen demand. So those kind of go together. Again, the phosphorus and solids tend to go together, and we're starting to see those starting to trend down a little bit. You're seeing 1 month at a time, but if you look at the report that's in your packet, you'll see that we're starting to see kind of in that fall, as we start to get cooler weather, tend to get a little bit better settling with the solids, and the phosphorus kind of comes with that, as we've talked about before with the tie there with the biological phosphorus system, that phosphorus tends to move in concert with the total suspended solids in our effluent. Chloride numbers running right in the median of where we typically run. Again, that's more of a dilution factor. Mass wise, if you add up the total mass discharge, we're actually down somewhat, which is reflective of the efforts, ongoing efforts for our ecosystems and pollution prevention teams, getting public education out there on softeners, and as we move into winter season, we'll be looking at road salt even. And then our fecal numbers continue to look really good. The system that we've put in is performing pretty well. This is the second full season for it, the new UV system. It's probably capable of putting out much lower numbers, but we're well below our regulatory numbers. And what the system does is adjust power to stay within the bounds that we're looking at. So it's kind of a situation where it may not look like it's really drastically outperforming the old system, but it is requiring less maintenance and it is demanding less power. So it definitely, even though that doesn't necessarily show up as drastically in the numbers as you might think it would, it's definitely and a big improvement over the previous system. Any questions on the plant performance? Okay. On resource recovery, the first of the two slides, clean water. Again, we're down compared to some of the previous years that maybe have rolled off this chart. We're about on track to be something in the range of about 13.5 billion gallons for the year. So pretty much in track with same flow rates as 2021, barring a wet fall. I'm reminded a couple of years ago, we had an extremely wet October that really pushed our numbers up, I believe in 2019. Actually kind of set us up for a biosolids issue going into that winter. If we recall, that was the year we got chased out of the fields by wet weather, and then early frost kind of shut us down. So, we're always at the mercy of the weather a little bit. Biogas, we're actually on track, continue on track to, I'd have to look back and see if it's actually an annual record, but we're looking at something over 300 million cubic feet. So we're making more biogas, which is kind of, that ties in pretty closely with increased loads at the plant that we've been seeing. So I expect those numbers to exceed the numbers. 2020, 2021 look very consistent. 2022, I expect is going to be quite a bit higher. So the downside of that is we're limited by some of our projects and maintenance in the ability to use that biogas. So Michael had mentioned showing kind of the flare there and some of that, where once we exceed the ability to use that biogas, then it basically got to go out via the flare. So producing more biogas sounds like a good thing, but it's only to the point that we can actually make utilization of it. And that's a future project to improve our ability to make full use of that. And reused effluent looks like it's about on the same track as normal. Any questions on this slide? Okay, we'll go to the third slide then. The resource recovery, this shows biosolid storage just under 40% full for the MetroGo storage tanks through the end of August. They've continued to have a pretty good haul out season, the MetroGo crew, and we're currently as of this morning, we're sitting at around 22% full. So they're running on fairly low tank levels, and looks like we're going to have a good haul out season. We're in good shape for going into the winter. And we've still got about, I would say, 6 to 8 weeks of haul season left. Struvite production remains a little lower than we would like to see. We're working on improving on that, or trying to find ways to tease a little bit more production out of that. MetroGo cake production, that number is probably going to be fixed through the end of the year. Right now, we're not looking at making any more of that. And then the MetroGo, this is the product we're sending to the biosolid storage tanks that we're in preparation for haul out, not what's been hauled out, but what has been sent to the storage tanks. So that's about on track to be somewhere between the 2020 and 2021 numbers. So it's probably something around about 35 million gallons is what we're projecting right now. So any questions on this slide? Okay, with that, thank you for your attention and your time.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So we had up above the 2023 commission meeting dates and schedule. That's in your packet. I was kind of just combining that with the future agenda topics. So people could take a look through. I think it's kind of the standard meeting schedule where we meet well, it's not the second and third Thursdays. It's like the last Thursday of the month and the 2 weeks before that. And then, so does anybody have anything for the future meetings? So the next meeting will be in person, and Forbes will hopefully give us some additional information on the customer communities and what they're doing in terms of employee pay. And then Michael and Bill will be coming back with additional information on our retention of employees, and then on some items for us to look at for our cash financing, which may then affect our rate increase. Okay, any other business? And adjournment, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Wilson,
John?
I move we adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson, second by Commissioner Clark to adjourn. And all those in favor say aye.
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 And opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. We will see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you. See you.
Thank
Everybody,
you.
take care.